how's it going?
This place is so dead. There's nothing cool going on.
You're just not looking in the right places.
Like where?
This, it's the latest thing. It's all over TikTok. It's super trendy. You wouldn't want to miss out, would you?
What is it?
Something that will make you feel amazing. If you're under a lot of stress because of your studies and you need to do better, you should take this.
But, I mean, is it safe?
It's what all the cool kids are into. Trust me, you'll love it. You take one and suddenly everything's brighter, more fun. You'll be hooked.
Hooked? I mean, that sounds a bit...
Just try it. You'll see what I mean.
Okay, I guess one time won't hurt. Oh, this is insane.
Told you. Now here's the catch.
Catch? What catch?
Welcome to dope paradise. That pill? Just a start. You have to buy more if you want to keep feeling that way. And you can make money by selling to others.
You mean this is a scam?
Not a scam. An opportunity. Just think about it.
But I thought you were my friend.
I am. I'm just trying to help you.
But I can't believe you. You hooked me on this for money?
Hey, welcome to the real world.
The alarming rise of drug addiction and overdoses among children is a pressing issue that cannot be ignored. Witnessing the effects of substance abuse on my best friends and the deaths of multiple high school students within my community has motivated me to take action. This is why I founded Project Clear Choice, a nonprofit dedicated to educating young people about drugs and destigmatizing addiction to provide hope to addicts and encourage recovery.
My name's Tristan and I'm 28 years old.
My name is Buzz Bloomfield and I'm 35 years old.
Sure, I'm State Senator Susan Rubio. I represent the 22nd Senate District.
I'm Alex and I'm 27 years old.
My name is Maria Dorsonia. I am a physicist and I'm also a professor of mathematics at CSUN and of computational medicine at UCLA.
My name is Aurora and I'm 26.
I'm Kai, I'm 19 years old.
My name is Angeline Marie Perez, I'm 49.
My name is Hannah, I'm 18 years old.
My name is G and I'm 31 years old.
I was very curious because I would, take walks in my neighborhood and I could see with my own eyes the effect of the opioid crisis in this country. And I just, it was a mixture of scientifically wanting to know more and also, just from a human perspective, trying to understand what was happening in the, brains and bodies of, people that are abusing these substances. And it was just, one was a scientific perspective. I just wanted to know the mechanisms of the brain and of the body that get affected by using substances of abuse and that eventually lead to addiction. And also from a more human point of view, every person that lives in a big city can see this with their own eyes, how deep this crisis has become. And I just wanted to be able to understand more what was going on in these people's lives just from a human perspective. My goal is twofold. One is to look at the data and try to better understand who and in what way is suffering from the opioid crisis. And so looking at geography, patterns in terms of types of drugs that are being abused, how drugs affect different genders, and also to try, after we analyzed all this based on past data, to try to see if we can forecast how this epidemic is going to evolve in the future. In this way, we hope to be able to make recommendations, for example, on where to invest and what particular categories, age-wise or again, gender, to focus on in prevention efforts.
The primary factors were that I got a head injury when I was 11 years old, and I was bullied real bad as a kid, and so I got pushed down at school, and so I hit the back of my head on the ground, and then later that day I got hit over the back of the head with some books by the same kid. You know, my parents took me to the hospital, and I was seeing double, and they said I had whiplash and a concussion, and gave me a IV shot of Dilaudid and sent me home with some opiates. That was really where it started. And then as time went on, it turned into I would get 3 shots a week of morphine or Dilaudid in the hospital. And then in between times, I was prescribed OxyContin, codeine, hydrocodone. So that was like so I was 11 years old. I ended up basically being suicidal at 13. I went to the mental hospital the first time that I was diagnosed as an addict. I found my way back to opiates again, and this time not from the doctors, but from kids at school. And at the same time, my parents started to have a divorce. They separated, and I was already into drugs, but that was definitely an excuse to go all in on drugs.
Part of the way I grew up was people kind of left me alone. As long as I did really well in school, I was kind of left to make my own choices. And I also didn't really know how to deal with certain traumas that I wanted to seek some sort of outside solution to escape what was going on. A messy divorce, difficult relations with my sibling. And so I escaped with different things, right, all the time. Homework, video games, girls, just anything to kind of forget what was going on at the time. The only difference is that when I joined college, there was drugs and alcohol around. It just happened to be in front of me, and because everyone was doing it, I thought, yeah, I'll do it. I also think because it was college, that the consequences of my actions were severely minimized.
My addiction to people around me that were giving me attention and the alcohol were completely tied together. And I wanted to have every night be like New Year's Eve and every day be like spring break, all the time. As soon as I woke up, I wanted to drink, not because I necessarily loved the taste of tequila at 7 o'clock in the morning, but I loved the idea that I could wake up and have this party come back. And as I got older, and maybe around 20, getting closer to 25, I started to realize that I would never go back to those first moments where it was spring break during the day and New Year's Eve at night. And the more I would try to surround myself with people that were partiers, that were into alcohol or drugs, who were willing to put on big shows, big parties, the more trouble each night became and the more damage I would cause to the people around me. And after too many nights of losing friends and noticing that when I would invite people out night after night, they would stop returning my calls or stop hanging out with me. I would stop getting invites to things, and I would feel even lonelier than I had ever felt before. And the feeling of anger and agitation that I had felt since I was a kid about being excluded came back, and I was still drinking, and the alcohol was no longer working on that feeling, but I couldn't stop the alcohol. I could not imagine a world where I didn't have this thing to let go of, and that came first in everything. I would give up absolutely everything if at the end of the day I got to use this substance to get back to that feeling. But once I realized that it wasn't working anymore, and I wouldn't get back to that place, no matter how much I drank, I would never be able to time travel and have those experiences exactly as they were night after night. I knew I had a problem, and I had come to the realization that normal people are not chasing that feeling every single day of their lives, and that I needed help.
Mostly the neighborhood I grew up in, it's a lot of drug activity, a lot of gang activity. It was just easily accessible, and a lot of people were using it. For me, it became a lot more personal when I found out that my dad used drugs.
I started using at the age of 14. It runs in my family. My mom, my dad, uncles, aunts. When I was younger, my house was the party house. That's the house that everybody would come to and party, and do their drugs and everything. And I was, at a very young age, attracted to that lifestyle.
I was friends with older kids who were obviously in like the whole drug scene and were using like hardcore drugs, like pills, like shooting up, like the whole thing. And my first boyfriend ended up being one of those kids. And so I would say kind of like being in that group, they definitely were the people who opened that door for me and kind of showed me what it looks like in real life. And I've had people in my family who were addicts, but that was like kind of my first time actually seeing it and understanding. And then my boyfriend overdosed and passed away. And then And then I a couple years later started using to try to understand why he did that. And then I found out and I went through the whole traumatizing experience that drugs does to you. And
the party never stopped, right? Whether I was drinking on my own or I was drinking at parties, it was kind of the same, except it was just more socially acceptable to do what I was doing in a party setting. Yeah. Things start, the obstacles seemed to compound themselves. The first obstacle was getting off of academic probation. The second one was probably completing an anger management course. The third one was having to tell my girlfriend why I got kicked out of a club or I'm not allowed back, or having to explain to a friend why did I hit him in the middle of a party, or why did I smash someone's car. Having to realize that my family doesn't trust me the same way, my sister doesn't look at me the same way. The obstacles seem to just get worse and worse. But I mean, there's like a metaphor. You can boil a frog alive if the temperature rises slow enough. And my descent in addiction was slow enough that I didn't even realize. You know, there were times where I considered taking my own life after doing some pretty horrible things.
So I used to volunteer in an emergency room, and I had one experience where I saw 3 different cardiac arrests happening at the exact same time, and I'm pretty sure 1, if not 2 of them both passed away, and that was due to a fentanyl overdose. So since then, I've just kind of been more aware of drug use and fentanyl, and at the same time I was going to these shows and I just was thinking to myself, I don't want this to happen to anyone I know or anyone around me.
In my own family, I have an aunt who had a daughter, my cousin, who struggled all her life. And I saw that firsthand. Addiction drove my cousin to be incarcerated over and over again, many years. She would come out, go into these treatment facilities, and she had a really difficult time recovering. So again, it would push her to commit crimes. So it became a cycle. And so what I witnessed was my aunt just struggling to help her daughter, not knowing how to help. Keep in mind, this is 20, 30 years ago. And eventually, her resiliency is what I admired, and it's families like my aunt that I want to help. She tried on her own and it was almost impossible. And that's why I think it's our responsibility to make ourselves available and put resources available so that we can help families like my aunt. Sadly, eventually my cousins succumbed to drug addiction and passed away. But the resiliency of my aunt is unmatched. I admire her for dealing with such a serious issue. My entire family dealt with the trauma because we cared, and she would disappear and cause a lot of problems to my aunt. But at the end of the day, we understood it was a disease.
Some of the lowest points, I'd say, would have to be missing out on a lot of opportunities with like friends, family, just not being able to participate in certain events or outings because, you know, I'm always chasing that high, or just things like that. I guess when I started to see some of the people around me, how their lives were changing because of drugs, at first it didn't really affect me because I always thought to myself, like, I'm gonna be different, you know, I'm gonna be able to control it. But You know, as time went by, I started to notice that I was becoming a lot more like them as well. Didn't really want that. You know, there's a lot of people, for me growing up, there's a lot of people who say like, oh yeah, once or twice doesn't hurt. But the more you try it, definitely it becomes easier to keep doing it. You become, it just becomes easier to use it, yeah.
During this time, I was like super party girl. I was like always going out. I was having family problems, like the whole thing. And I was high off drugs and I was partying with my friends, and my friends were involved with bad people, and it was kind of like a drug dealing kind of situation where my friends were dealing drugs and then that whole thing. And my friends had, I think, owed these people like drugs or like owed them money or something of the sort. And I guess I was like the quickest bait that they could get to get what they wanted in return. So they just like tried to like get a hold of me until they were able to get a hold of my friend. I dealt with really bad derealization, which is something I still deal with now, which is basically where I have no idea like what's real. Like I don't feel real myself, like I like don't see people as being real. I didn't see any of that. I lost all sense of fear. I craved the adrenaline. I would put myself in dangerous situations on purpose to kind of fulfill like that adrenaline rush that I needed. I would sometimes like hear things like whispers, like things like that. It was like super weird, like things that weren't there. And sometimes people get it not as bad. Sometimes people get it even worse to where they're actually, you know, like seeing people and things like that. I want to say I got it kind of in the middle to kind of less in the middle.
Is there anything else that you think is important to share?
I don't think so. Just don't do it.
Well, it's affected me in a way where I ended up in institutions, 5150. I ended up in juvenile hall at the age of maybe 15. I spent some time there, and majority of my youth, I was homeless on the streets using. I felt sad. I remember feeling like when people have passed, you know, you talk to them one day and the next day they're gone, and you're like, oh my God, what happened? Especially like recently being in recovery, that I have been clean and sober. I had a sister, sobriety sister, and she was clean and she went back out, and we found out that she had overdosed. And I took it really hard because I had gotten really close to her. And I also had a nephew who passed away as well. He overdosed, and once again, talked to him one day and the next day he was gone. Yeah, I want to say my sobriety sister, we were supposed to go pick her up. She was trying to get back in rehab again. We were supposed to help her out, maybe go pick her up, pick up her things, and somehow it just didn't work out with a fellow, sobriety sister, and we didn't do that. We never got to her. And within a couple of days, through social media, we had found out that she passed away. And we knew she was using fentanyl. We knew that because that's what's out right now. There was a lot of regret and a lot of remorse. I wish that I had been there. I wish that I did go pick her up. I wish that, we could have got her in her home. I wish that she had never relapsed. It's that thing where, come on, we're supposed to do this together. And it just made me appreciate life. And a lot of times if I feel down or I feel like not motivated, I remember like I'm doing it for her as well,
I was in and out of jail, juvenile, probation. I was on probation from like 13 or 14 until I was 19. By that time I had lost everything. I had lost all my friends, I lost my family. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with me. And I was in Spokane, Washington, shooting meth, sleeping in the back of my car. Just decided to start heading south because I figured if I'm stealing from Walmart to get high, I can do it where it's warmer. And so I kicked heroin for the last time in Spokane and basically made the full transition into meth. And I just kept heading south until I hit Los Angeles. And then I held on to the car as long as I could, but eventually it got impounded. And so that was where I started sleeping on the sidewalk and just doing drugs. I guess the one thing I want to say is that I sought out all the drugs that I tried. I wanted to try all the drugs, and I didn't really care that I was going to be an addict. If anything, I found a lot of identity in the fact that I was an addict.
It's challenging just making room in our lives for it because it's always going to be there. It's never going to go away. As cool as it is to have the community that he has, it's also like we always have to make room for it. There's a lot of big life things happening. Like if you, I don't know, we want to get married, we want to have kids, we want to have a house, we go to work, he's starting a business, but that always has to be there and it has to be first. So that's a struggle sometimes. I think the most important thing, whether you're struggling with addiction, whether you're helping someone struggle through their addiction, you're dating someone, it's your family, whatever the case may be, I think you need your own group of people. You need to find your people, find your community, and it can be hard and overwhelming, and sometimes we really don't want to, and I really wanted to do it on my own for a long time and realized that I couldn't, and that's okay. And so I would say, as hard as it is, don't stop looking for people because they are there and they do want to help you.
The human body, people, all of us, we are built in such a way there are certain activities that we like. And we like these activities because they're good for us as people and as a species. One of them is, for example, eating. We all like a nice ice cream, we all like pizza, and when we're hungry, we really like food. And that is because, again, we have evolved to like these things and to want them also, because without them we would die. The same thing goes for, for example, taking care of little children. We all have satisfaction out of that, and that's good for the little kid, but it's also good for, the survival of the species, right? That's why we, have this maternal and paternal instincts. And all this is regulated by a chemical in the brain that is called dopamine. And whenever we do these things, we eat nice food, or we are happy with our families and all that, we release dopamine in our brains and it makes us feel good and happy. So now drugs come into the equation because they release artificially large amount of dopamines in such a way that the brain has never seen before. And so our brains are flooded with this stuff. We feel all this contentment and excitement that we've never felt before. And all of a sudden, that becomes a surge of dopamine that people try to get, because it's so much more than whatever contentment you can get from all these other activities. And that is in some sense when sort of the addiction comes in, that you sort of neglect all those other things that gave you happiness in your life in the search for this chemically enhanced sort of happiness that comes from all this great amount of dopamine that is released from the drugs. However, after some time, the body gets used to all this extra dopamine that is coming from the drugs. And so there comes a point that you, even if you take more and more of this, it doesn't give you any more joy or happiness. It actually, in fact, gives you side effects. It makes you feel, it gives you negative consequences without you feeling any high about it. And so that is when, again, the drugs really take over your life and you are left with very little.
I think it's that we're not bad people. I always say what I did and who I am are two completely different things. The things I did were terrible and tragic and hurt a lot of people. But as a drug addict, I was really only concerned with how to get more. I wasn't really, there's just like this blank place in my mind at the time where I was stealing from my family to get more drugs, and it wasn't because I had anything against them. It wasn't because my mom was a bad mom. It was just because I needed to get more drugs. And, it's controversial that addiction is a disease, but it's progressive, fatal, and incurable, which is by definition a disease. It doesn't mean that we don't take ownership of it. It just means that we don't have control over it, especially to stop. And the only way to stay stopped is with a lot of help from our friends. But we're not bad people. I've met a lot of recovering addicts, and I met a lot of addicts when I was using, and none of them were really bad people. They were just people in bad circumstances. And we all just did what we had to do to get more.
I think a lot of people like to think that it's not as real as people say it is. People like to think oh, I could take the tiniest bit and be okay. And it's not the case at all. You won't be okay. And it gets worse before it gets better, and it can get really bad. And I think people don't understand that at all. And then I think in my own experience, I've definitely dealt with people treating me differently when they find out about my past. And they're kind of like walk on glass, like, oh, like, what am I allowed to say? What am I allowed to do? Like, I've had friends that are now experimenting with drugs, have been like, oh, like, am I allowed to do this in front of you? Like, will this like trigger anything? And I'm like, no, like, I have self-control. Like, I'm okay now.
A lot of people like to focus on the addiction or what we're addicted to rather than what might have caused it or why we decided to do those things. Yeah, it's nice to really listen to some people's stories.
I've done so many things where it feels like someone else is like puppeting me around. I wish people understood that. Like, sometimes I use like a food metaphor, you know, like, oh, we're hungry, I want to eat. Or like, oh, I'm gonna have another cookie, right? But what if there's like that deep urge, which is like, if I don't have another cookie right now, bad things are gonna happen. I will do anything for another cookie. You know, it's like, I don't think there's choice at that point. I wish people realized that like, it's not my choice to be an alcoholic. You know, I am not ashamed of being an alcoholic. But today I have a responsibility to do something with that. You know, I have a disease. You know, we don't blame the person with diabetes. Something happened along the way. An invisible line was crossed, and now it's like, I can't go back. You know, I wish people just kind of realized, you know, I'm not a bad person. I'm just sometimes get desperate when I don't have my drug of choice and have no other solution to fill this hole inside of me.
I've seen just a lot of judgment, which is understandable to a certain extent, but I guess the notion that people can never get better or can never change is a big one that comes up. That people choose to be this way. And yes, they have choices over their behaviors and actions and what they're gonna do about it, but I've seen firsthand how much people can really change. And to think that people can't is just a huge misconception.
I would say to other families that, you know, where I come from, you don't kick a person while they're down. You know, don't shut the door if you know that there's a problem. Don't judge, don't push them out on the street. Don't, you know, offer an ear to find out what's going on, because there's something deeper there. It's something that they might be dealing with, you know, and they don't know how to handle those emotions. And the drugs just make it feel better, you know, and it takes away everything. Try to be supportive and don't give up on anybody, you know, no matter what. There's always another side to it, you know.
Well, first of all, I would like to say that it's so easy for adults to judge, and sometimes not understanding that our youth fall victims very easily. Sometimes someone may offer the drug, not understanding what they're taking. And I want our adults to be aware, number one, but once they discover that either their child, a neighbor, or anyone for that matter is using, be a little bit more understanding. It is an addiction, it's a sickness, and our job is to understand, be compassionate, and offer support whenever we can. And I think that's my goal, to make the community aware that it's our responsibility too, because collectively we live in our community, and collectively we need to help wherever we can.
I hand out Narcan at teen-hosted underground shows. So basically what that means is I will go to concerts and I'll set up tables and I'll interact with all the teenagers who show up, teach them about Narcan, what it is, talk about fentanyl, and I'll just hand them out. A lot of people think Narcan is meant for people who heavily do drugs, and that's a major misconception. Narcan is more of just a first aid item that anyone should have. It's not something you use on yourself, it's something you use on someone else to save them in times of an emergency. So the main misconception, I would say, is that people think it's for only for people who heavily use drugs. Having Narcan available just kind of adds a little safety net almost. I can go around and I can be like, don't do drugs, but that doesn't mean people are gonna listen to me. With having Narcan available, I at least know that if something goes wrong, if an accident happens, there is a way to safely bring them back. I think everyone should have Narcan on them. I keep it in my car, I keep it in my purse. You never know when you'll need it. There's a law in place that says you're allowed to use it on someone when they're unconscious. So there's no harm in doing it. You're not gonna hurt someone if you mistake them for having an overdose. If they're not having an overdose and you give them Narcan, they will be okay. But if someone is having an overdose and Narcan is not available, that can be fatal. So I say it's better to be safe than sorry and just have a box of Narcan. Basically what had happened was it was like the end of my 4-hour shift. Things were really quiet, nothing was happening that day, and all of a sudden I see nurses just like running out to the waiting room, and that's something I had never seen before, because usually if there's an emergency they'll be rushed in through the ambulance bay, but they were like running out to the waiting room. And what had happened was someone had left a car, not in park, so it's still rolling, with 3 people passed out in the back seat and a bag of drugs, and all 3 of them had to be rushed in, CPR. It was a scary experience, and the emergency room only has 2 trauma rooms, and then there was 3 people. It was a really scary experience. It was really scary.
You know, and I want to be honest, and as weird as it sounds, I felt pretty free when I first started using on the streets. It was kind of fun at first. And mostly just because it was the first time that I could get high and just get left alone in my life. And that quickly was overshadowed by how terrible things are on the streets. But for the first month or 2, I was just happy that I could be left alone and use drugs. I got arrested 6 times that year. Really, I lost my mind. You know, you see the guys out here just like flailing their arms and screaming at the sky and talking to nobody. That became me. The last time I got arrested, I weighed 125 pounds, 6 feet tall, and I was really ready to die. I thought I was going to, and not in like a suicidal kind of way, just like this is the hand I was dealt, this is the way it's gonna go, and I'm just gonna be another dead junkie. And so really, the last time I got arrested was what made me seek help. And it was just because I was facing 10 years in prison, and the plan was really to die, not to go to prison. And so I don't know, I was just tired. I was just really tired of how things were. And I couldn't blame my family for anything anymore. I couldn't blame anybody for anything anymore. And I really had to look at the fact that I was 21 years old, and even though I've been using drugs at everyone for all this time, the only person whose life I'm ruining is my own. So I got into a court-mandated program. I did 6 months in jail. I got out, they put me in outpatient, and I had to drug test 6 times a week and go to groups and just jump through a lot of hoops to not do 10 years in prison. I wound up in a community of addicts and alcoholics, and I found a mentor pretty much my first day out of jail. I just knew that this guy was gonna be the guy who saved my life. And I don't know how, I don't know why, I just knew that this was the guy who was gonna help me. And in working with him, he came from a similar background as I did, and he had 30 years sober when I met him, and he has, I think, 38 now. You know, he would traffic meth and his addiction and all kinds of crazy stuff. Just him sharing with me his story, his experience, his hope, and all of that, I felt safe to share the things I swore I'd never talk to anybody about for the first time. I think overall, the love that I experienced in this community was the first time I'd experienced unconditional love in my life. Everything with my parents always had strings attached. It always had expectations, and love was always taken away from me if I didn't meet those expectations. And this community really became my family. And I don't think that I would still be here if it wasn't for the love that they gave me. You know, they loved me until I could love myself. You know, now that I've been sober for 7.5 years, my family's blood, but this community's really my family, and I just couldn't do it without them. My life has changed completely. It's beyond anything that I could have ever imagined for myself. And through a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication and a lot of struggles, I mean, I have a life that I never thought imaginable for myself. I own a business, I'm a general contractor. That mentor I talked about and I became business partners, which is kind of crazy to look back at in the condition I came in as. But you know, I have a girlfriend who was never an addict. We've been living together for 2.5, going on 3 years now. My family has their struggles, but we're at least on speaking terms. But I have a normal life. The only thing that's a little weird about my life is the fact that I'm a recovering addict and I have to do certain things to keep what I have and to gain more. But overall, I'm just a normal guy now with a really crazy story. I don't think that you're too far gone to get better. I know that I was a couple weeks from dying when I was out there, and I thought I was too far gone, but the truth is it was just really hard to come back, but it's possible. There's always hope as long as you're breathing.
Yeah, even for people who have like quit for a very long time, they always tell me that there's always still a little bit of a craving, a little bit of a desire to go back. I think regardless of that, constantly trying to fight it, and then if you do fall into it, you know, trying to recover again. I think that, you know, mentality, never wanting to quit.
I would say find something that you love in your heart. Drugs is not the only thing that can be fun. Writing music, writing poems, skateboarding, hanging out with your friends, and just not enjoying the time, you know. Learn to be okay with who you are as a person and not to look for the acceptance for somebody else to tell you you're okay. Be okay with who you are and work on that instead of, you know, searching for it in something else or somebody else.
And then life gets bigger when I don't mess everything up. How do I deal with a job that I don't like? Or what about if there's a friend that I don't want to be friends with? Am I gonna scream and yell at them? You know, I've had family pets die. How do I deal with that? How do I deal with all the things that I used to run away from in a respectable manner with some dignity and grace? I don't know what the biggest challenge has been. I feel like there's a set of little challenges and a set of little victories that I just appreciate. Sometimes I could have 3 small things in a row go wrong, and there's like that primal urge to escape. And on paper it seems so small, but like within, it's like, I don't like this anymore. I want to go back out and drink. That's a huge obstacle to overcome, but it might only last 20 minutes until I'm like, you know what, I'm glad I didn't. I can go back to doing, I still have the friends and the job and the respect of my family. I didn't ruin anything along the way. The day-to-day, just like having people that reach out to me and I reach out to know that like I'm part of something, to feel part of, is like huge. You know, I like to celebrate the little victories with others and hear them share it with me. You know, the first time someone looked at me and said I was kind, I hadn't heard that in a decade. When someone was like, I don't think you have an anger problem, right? The first time I got invited to someone's birthday party, or the first time when my mom had to leave the country and she immediately called me and said, can you take care of the house? I've been kicked out of her house 3 times. The fact that I was the first person that she thought that she could rely on, I was like, you know, like something's changing, right? The first time I looked in the mirror and didn't hate what I saw, you know, when other people smile when I walk into a room and I'm like, something's different, you know, I hold on to that. I feel part of something. It's so easy for a guy like me to want to isolate, but when I feel the joy of being part of something greater, it doesn't matter if it's something huge or little. Like today I know that, yeah, I'm part of something, and that's what really matters.
You know, life in sobriety is so much more full, so much more compacted with love and care and connection than any time ever before in my addiction. And I was always looking for love in my addiction. I just had absolutely no idea where to find it. I didn't know how to be a good brother. I didn't know how to be a good friend. People said I was, and I swear it was just by opportunity that I could be. But now I get to have awareness, and I get to see when things in my life are becoming addictive behavior. You know, I get to see when I feel a certain way about something. I get to identify why I feel that way. I get to work through my feelings instead of burning up on the inside with anger or hate. And I get to feel things so beautifully. I have no hate for people. I have no anger that I want to feed. I have to constantly choose to grow as a person, but it's worth it. It's tremendously worth it. And knowing how I feel and accepting it is such a growth for me.
But I want to send the message that not only myself as a legislator, but all my colleagues in the state Senate and the Assembly are very committed. That is the number one issue I would say we're tackling this year. How do we help our students, our youth, and our families? By way of example, we are passing legislation that's going to help make test strips accessible, not only in our schools, but in clubs. Sometimes our kids go to these clubs and they don't understand what they're taking. So we want to make sure that these establishments have test strips. So if anyone is concerned of what they're drinking or putting in their mouth, they can ask for the strips. We also want to make sure that we gather data. If we don't have the information, we don't know how to help. So as a state, we have a bill that's going to allow us to collect data to see how serious the issue is, what age groups are being targeted. And so right now it continues to be a problem, and unless we are aggressive with it, I don't think we're gonna stop it. But the good news is people are looking out for them. We are working really hard to educate, bring resources, and I want them to know they're not alone. They need to reach out to their local police departments. They're able to give them resources. My office here in the state Senate, and of course everyone has different legislators, so go to your assembly person, your senator, and ask, where are the resources? There's so many people out there that care, that want to help. You just need to ask for the help.
Just don't do it.
I would say find something that you love in your heart.
Life in sobriety is so much more full, so much more compacted with love and care and connection.
You need to find your people, find your community.
On the other side, there is a lot of hope out there.
There's always hope as long as you're alive.
Thank you. Clap? Yes. Thank you. Can you clap one time? One more time. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Clap. One more time. Thank you. Wow. Done?
Do I have to clap?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. Yes, clap. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Good.
Yeah. Everybody, we are live from UCLA Biomathematics Department. It is Saturday, July 20th, 2024. It is 7:30 p.m., I think. It's nice and cool. The temperature is nice.